Hey everybody, welcome back to the 2022 West Virginia Cybersecurity and Game Developers Expo. We have a session here today with Chris May from Advantage Technology, and he's going to talk to you about how you can build out a security strategy in your environment, or if it's been a while, how you can refine that security strategy in your environment. Hey Chris, thank you so much for coming on and doing a session for us, sir. I'll get you set up and get you going.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. All right. Well, welcome everybody. As was just stated, today we're going to be looking at cybersecurity and how do we build out with strategy, right? We can build things out and just throw things at the wall and hope something sticks and make it safe. But how do we do that with a plan, with a strategy, and get actionable results? And that's what we want to dig into a little bit today. I'm thankful for the people that are on here. We definitely need people thinking about cybersecurity in the state of West Virginia, talking about it, and it's exciting for me to see people involved. So first things first, who am I? Right? Why am I even qualified to talk about this? So my name is Chris May, and I am the Director of Security. Actually, the actual title is Director of Security Solutions with Advantage Technology. So as you can imagine, as a director of security for an IT company, there's a lot involved. And the reason it's actually director of security solutions is because we're a solutions-based IT and security company. We don't just sell products or gadgets or bells and whistles. We try to put things in place that actually answer a challenge. And that's what I do. Advantage Technology, a little background on us. We're the largest IT company in the state of West Virginia. We've been in business 20 years as of last month, and we're a full-service IT solutions and cybersecurity company. We have 5 offices in 3 states at this point, and we have a little over 100 team members. So it's exciting to see that grow in West Virginia. We were founded in Charleston, and that's where our home office still resides. So where did I come from, and how did I get here? This is where I started. This isn't the actual room on a naval ship. I can't show you the control systems of a nuclear reactor, but I started out in the U.S. Naval Nuclear School in the mid-90s around nuclear engineering. And that was when there was a big concern around connected communication systems, satellite communications, and things that came into these reactors on submarines and aircraft carriers. So I got a really early entry into understanding more of that security and how it affected, IT and OT and how that merges together, and led me down some interesting paths in my career. Later, I was with various companies. Before becoming to Advantage, I was with DuPont Chemical when we were still one whole company before 2015, and we were a Fortune 100. Same thing, right? Big IT needs, security needs wrapped around operational technology and those needs in large scale manufacturing and things like that. So I love what I do. And then I ended up here at Advantage. I was our information security consultant for a few years and then became our director of security. So that's just a little bit about me. And, speaking of the military, and especially since we're talking about security and cybersecurity, what do you guys think the warrior guardian of the future will look like? Right? Do you think it's going to look like the big guys here, the men and women with all the muscles and the guns and going into storm a country? I think it's going to look like us. I think it's going to look like your guy back here, like me. And if you're familiar at all with the current state of IT and information security, you understand this. What we face now, not only do we face a war that's affected people globally, but that's also created a larger cyber war. It's created gaps and openings where people aren't focused maybe at the things they normally would be because their attention's faced on something like, say, just like Russia. And now maybe they're not paying attention to other parts of the world where attacks are just as prevalent, if not more. Nobody's going to storm the beaches of the United States at this point, right? It would be insane. It's a death trap. But what they can do and are trying to actively do is shut down our power grids, shut down our water treatment facilities, shut down infrastructure, shut down banking, shut down businesses. That's the lifeblood. If they can cripple us through our technology infrastructure, it won't be nearly as hard of a takeover. So this is where we're at right now. Your cybersecurity resources are on the front lines. Like I said, I came from the military. I know men and women trained by all the different branches of the military and cybersecurity and throughout the 3-letter government acronyms. And these are the people that are protecting us every day. It's that serious now. And why is it so serious? So look at what we see, right? Look at all these recent headlines. Employees at fault in breaches, human error, cybersecurity threats are inside your company, employee errors cause data breaches, undertrained employees to blame, Fed and employee contractors to blame. Organizations blame their staff. If you're in the cybersecurity business right now or looking to get into that in any way, these are things you have to remember. If you see the common theme here, it always comes back to a person nowadays, most of the time. Years ago when I was doing this, we had to protect servers really well. We had to protect the firewalls. We had to look for open ports, insecure listening ports, right? We didn't want RDP open to the internet, terminal servers not open to the internet. We've locked those things down over the years. Now the biggest threat is that we have hands-on keyboards with inside of our organizations that have access to the internet, to open emails, to download attachments, to enable macros, to do all these things that can threaten our networks. We've got to now understand that this is a multifaceted problem, and how do we build a plan and a strategy to attack something as big as this? I show you these headlines to say we can't stop the fact that we have to have people on keyboards within our organizations. So now we know that's where the real threat is, because we have to give them access and they're not properly educated about a lot of things. So how do we go about doing this in a strategic manner to where we can build on not only our computer assets, but also our people and process assets, right? So that's what we want to dig in today. We don't want to end up like this, right? I'm looking at this more from a CIO, CISO standpoint when we talk through this today. I do a lot of work as virtual CIO or virtual CISO for other companies that we support. We have a few thousand customers at this time, but nobody wants to be this person, right? Nobody wants to get the finger pointed at them as the person that was in one of those headlines, or as the CIO, CISO, or IT director that ultimately becomes responsible for these breaches. So I get asked this question a lot in what I do. Why is this so prevalent? Why is cybersecurity blown up so much? Why is it all so terrifying? And it's simple. It's right here. 93% of all money is digital, and that's what's at risk. What you need to know is 99% of cybercrime nowadays is just a financial crime carried out through technology, the internet, cell phones, whatever it may be. If you have a bank account, you are a target. That's all they're looking for. With the advent of cryptocurrency, right? The Bitcoins and the Ether and the Ethereum and all this stuff in the world, it allows you to receive a payment after you hold somebody for ransom that's basically untraceable. This is what's at risk. They just want your money. They don't care if you're in West Virginia. They don't care if you're in South America. They see an IP address and a bank account, and that's what they're going after. That's what should show you this is not going to go away. As long as people can make money, it's here to stay. So let's just do a quick agenda real quick of kind of just the beginning of this presentation, right? A real quick overview of cybercrime. Most of you all, I'm sure, understand, but I'm not sure the entire audience makeup. The quick review of the real cyber threats today. We'll touch on cybercrime as a service real quick. And then what we're really going to dig into is best practices and how we start to build this strategy based off what we know about current situations in security. So we'll go through this one fairly quickly. What is cybercrime? It is simply a criminal activity that involves the internet, a computer system, or some kind of computer technology. That's all it is. 50% of online adults were a victim of cybercrime last year. Some people think that stat is staggering, but if you have information with T-Mobile, they lost 4 million records recently, and I heard yesterday they think that maybe it was more. If your information's in there, you're a victim. Target, Visa, Amex, you name it, banks, hospitals, any hospital breaches. If your data is in any of these breaches, you've been a victim. It may not have affected you yet, but you still have information floating out somewhere on the open internet. Last year, it cost the economy $500 billion. You think about that, that's $500 billion that we know of that it cost the global economy last year. If you look at it, there was one Chinese Bitcoin exchange that got hit for, I think, $503 million like that. It's just instantly. Another Bitcoin exchange recently got hit again. One that stored wallets and all kinds of things got hit for about 400 million. I mean, this is money from people in the world economy that have invested in these platforms that is now gone. That's a big number. They expect by the end of 2022 that to be $1 trillion, that it will affect our economy this year, our global economy. And this number was just updated, and I didn't have time to update the slide, but the newest numbers I saw say 35% of small and medium businesses have been a specific target. I don't mean that they received phishing emails or spam or anything like that. I mean that they have been an actual target of a targeted attack scenario, right? Whether it's spear phishing, going after payments and payment information or wire transfers, or going after specific passwords of key employees in the organization. It's a big number, and it's only going to go up. That's what we're facing right now. And so sometimes I get questions, well, what actually is cybercrime? Just as far as, let's break it down in one sentence. And this is it to me, right? Black hat cybercrime is malicious online behavior that is motivated by profit and predictable return on investment. Why do we run businesses? For profit and ROI. It's the same thing, and that's why it's not going to go away anytime soon. You have organized crime in the picture. You have people that just absolutely know how to do very high level activity in technology that deploy this to make themselves rich without even running a company. So they're make money off of it. And as long as they continue to make money and get a return on their investment, it'll never go away. So we're going to constantly have to stay on top of this. So I talk about, that's a little brief overview of what cybercrime is from a statement, right? But from a threats perspective, what are the threats that I see right now that on a broad scale, without digging into specific industries or certain verticals, on a broad scale, what are we seeing right now that's a threat? First of all, e-crime has popped back up as a buzzword. I try to use the words that people may be familiar with from news or TV. And really, it's what we're talking about with cyber threats, right? The problem we have as we move forward in this world is years ago, we could block a certain country, we could block traffic from different places that we didn't do business with, and we were able to really intelligently identify malware, malicious software that may be coming through different geolocations. Well, what's happened in recent years, as a lot of you may know, is that's become impossible. We have threat actors that will take over server space or workstation space from a U.S. company, unbeknownst to them, and they won't try to do anything within that space except use some of those resources. What happens then is they begin to build this botnet, if you will, of devices that are all coming from trusted ISPs, trusted IP ranges, trusted geolocations within the US. And it makes it very difficult for us to catch things the way we used to in the past. Now we have things that we can call almost good malware that are really impossible for a user to detect, but also get very hard for us as security practitioners to detect due to some of those things they do to mask who they are, if you will. So I know a lot of people are familiar with that, but if you're not, that helps to show you why this is so prevalent and harder to attack nowadays. And you say, well, from that point, what are they trying to do? Well, there's a few things, right? They could be trying to deploy a malware onto your machine that maybe they're trying to deploy a keylogger to find usernames, passwords, right? Maybe they're trying to use that network to send out emails that look like they're coming from trusted sources so they get through your spam filters, right? The biggest thing we see is the phishing right now, right? Phishing is just like you're fishing in a river, right? You throw a line out, try to get something, you catch it. When you catch it, you want to kill it and eat it. That's exactly what they want to do. So how's that done now? It's done by email, phone, text message, fax, voicemail, right? And the basic goal of most phishing nowadays is credential harvesting. They want to try to lead you somewhere to where they can either A, get hooks into your machine, or B, get you to put in your username and password somewhere so they have that. That's what they're after. If they can get that username and password, now they can come in the system as a trusted user with trusted access, which is terrifying, and start to do some really nefarious things, right? The big goal right now is for them to get those credentials so they can get in and deploy ransomware. Ransomware is exactly what it says. Hold you for ransom, you have to pay. I think we all know that at this point. That's the goal, and that's what's terrifying. All you need to have to be a target of ransomware is access to a bank account or money, which all of us do. That's the problem we see nowadays. I will tell you, too, that most ransomware we see has been dwelling in the network for over 200 days. They may get in through one person with low-level access, but if they can move laterally through that network without you seeing, they're going to go lock your backups out or destroy your backups, put encryption keys on everything, and then you walk in one day and every screen is red or orange, and you find out who you have to email for a ransom payment. It's terrifying. That's the basic threat we're facing today. What we really want to dig into is how are we going to attack some of these threats and build a plan? First of all, since we know ransomware is the fastest growing threat by far, how do we prevent it? That's the big question. How do we prevent? First of all, we have to train employees. Super simple. Set up a training program. We have to filter emails. We have to scan emails, and more than scan, we have to blow up attachments in sandboxes to ensure that these attachments don't have anything in them nefarious before we get them to the user. We have to configure good firewalls. We have to patch systems to make sure they're updated. And we have to have good updated managed antivirus. I look at these as the have tos. These are the basics. Any company you work inside of or with needs to do these things nowadays at a minimum. What's our next step? Then we need to start looking at managing the use of privileged accounts, right? We don't need everybody to have local administration on their machine. We don't need the CFO or the CEO to have admin access to the domain controller. It's usually not safe. We want to control access to network locations, be that physical and virtual, right? We want to control access to places where we have switching and data center and all that physically. We also want to make sure we have very good walls and gates to let people in and out of those digitally. We want to disable macros, right? One of the big things we see now is these emailed office files, right, that come back and forth. If macros end up enabled, we have a problem. Now we have a program that is allowed to execute within the environment, and that's not what we need. We only want to enable macros in situations where it's absolutely necessary, very limited and by case basis. And we want to implement software restriction policies. This is a big one nowadays. One of the easiest ways you can go in and help your organization is you don't give everybody local admin, and you have a set guideline around what software is allowed on machines and what is restricted. Restricted should be social medias, all those fun things of the world, personal banking apps, right? All these things that don't work for you in business. From there, we really need to look at disabling RDP, right? If you have open RDP or any kind of RDP right now, it's a little terrifying. There's some good solutions for it, whether we set it up over some type of Citrix or Horizon client or some type of more secured VPN access. We really want to lock down that remote desktop protocol. We want to use whitelisting, right? This is a big one. This is a conversation that's very divisive right now. I have networks of clients that is only whitelisted, and if you want to go somewhere and it's not on that white list of 27 places, you can't get there because there's no need to go anywhere else to do business within the company. Some of the employees hate it because they can't get on their Facebooks and things, but it's very safe. And we really like to execute in a virtual environment where possible now, right? We have some extra protections we can set up through virtualization, set up security servers in front of Horizon or Citrix servers, and use that virtual environment to manage the security. And we're going to dig into all this in more detail a little bit. And what we really want to do is prevent, right? We really need physical and logical separation of networks in larger environments. What we don't want is that person I said that gets low-level access that then begin to infiltrate through the entire network because we don't have any logical or physical separation in the network, so they can just move all over the place. As we begin to break these down, if they get in and they can only get into one small containment, right, or they're stuck in over here in a DMZ somewhere, then we're not so worried about what's going to happen in the rest of the network. So this is this might seem like a lot if you're not in the cybersecurity field or whatever, but what we really need to know is now we've seen the threats and kind of ransomware specifically, how do we attack that? What we really want to look at now is, the basics of how we build a strategy and how we need to look at it from the side of IT and security. So first things first is bad news isn't wine. It does not improve with age. This speaks to a very basic thing that I think all of us can attack as low-hanging fruit right now is training your employees. If we can get employees trained and get them to understand just the severity, not even the mechanics of it, right? Just what the risk is to them in the business, then we can get them to start to tell us if they make a mistake. As I said before, 200 plus days ransomware in an environment on average now. If we would have known when somebody thought they clicked the wrong email or opened the wrong attachment, we wouldn't be in that situation. So always remember, from an IT security standpoint, the more we know, the faster about anything that could be a possible problem. And we need to act quickly too and not blow those things off. Because otherwise we're going to end up here, right? This is where we don't want to be. Unfortunately, I get called in a lot, and we get called in a lot. We're referred clients from other smaller companies where we have to deal with ransomware. And this is usually the position they're in. They're like hiding under the desk. They're terrified. They don't know what to do, especially if it's a family-owned operation for years. I mean, it can cripple and shut down your whole business. So what we're trying to do is not end up in this situation. And as leadership, as IT directors or managers or as CIOs or CISOs, we have to help ensure this doesn't happen. That is our job within the organization, is to make sure that nobody's hiding under their desk because they got some threatening email saying their best friend was going to kill them and they have a hit on them. And it looks so real because they've been in their email for weeks, right? I've seen that scenario. And the lady was actually hiding under her desk. That's why I put this slide up. So we don't want to end up there. Here's one of the ways you can easily end up there. From a strategy perspective, if you spend more on coffee than on IT security, you will be hacked. I don't know if I agree with the last line. I don't think anybody deserves to be. But I put that up here because this is Richard Clark, who was the former White House cyber czar. Incredibly intelligent man, usually not too over the top, usually didn't say things like this, but this shows you his frustration with businesses in America. It's like they wouldn't spend any money, they wouldn't do anything, but yet they screamed at the government to help them when it all blew up. We've got to think about this. We've got a budget for it, especially in a C-suite role or a director role. We have to be able to help make the case of why we need to budget for these things so we don't end up being the person that gets hacked, right? And there's some ways we can go about that. First of all, we can start to tell our leadership above us, right? A lot of times, even if you're in that C-suite position, there's budgets, there's boards, there's directors, there's ownership. We've got to be able to intelligently tell them why the threat is so much worse than it used to be to get them to understand why you might need to spend the money on these things. Here's an easy point for you to bring up. It's never been easier for new entrants to enter the cyber market. We say it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Well, here's why. It's cybercrime as a service. There's crime kits available online everywhere now. The one on the left was a Chinese tool that could create Gmail accounts, abuse Gmail accounts. It could interface with CAPTCHA, SMS. It was insane. And you imagine all these valid Gmail accounts you could create to now send out phishing attacks and everything you can imagine. It was available online for $200. You don't have to write these programs anymore. You can buy them and deploy them even if you don't know what you're doing. The one on the right was an account checker. This one was Russian. You could any good programmer coder leaves notes in the code, and the notes in the one were Chinese, the notes in the other one were Russian. You could have found ones from 40 other countries that did just the same thing. So don't think that there's any significance in these two countries. But the one on the right would check email accounts, PayPal, Skype, Twitter, passwords. It supported like 17 different web services. It was insanely complicated. This is what we're up against. This is why this problem is not going to go away and why we have to have a good strategy. We're up against people that can deploy these things that have no idea what they're doing and then have no idea sometimes if you pay them how to get you the decryption keys. And with that being the threat, this isn't going to keep you safe, right? I run into this a lot. I have a lot of people say, oh, we're just some little company. We're here. Nobody pays attention to us. We're not at risk. That's a wrong answer. You have an IP address again. That's what they see. They look for an IP. They're just looking at your presence on the net. They don't care where you live, and they're looking to see if you have access to money. We're no longer in a position where you can bury your head in the sand and say, "Oh, this doesn't apply to me." It's just not going to work. So what do we do? Right? We've stated all that. We've stated this is the threat. These are some basic ways to stop it with technology, with software in place, right? With training in place. But what we really need to think about once we know all those basics is what is our strategy, right? What's our process and our program? I talk to people a lot about this, and this security journey is an actual journey. If you notice the slide on the screen, I've got my little guy here. He's running his heart out around this circle. You notice there's no end. There's no start line. There's no finish line. This is there. And the reason that we have to be this way is because the threat actors, the attackers coming at us, there's no start or end for them either. They're continuously getting better. They're continuously taking money they make from these attacks and investing them in better resources, better people, better computers. They're running businesses now. This is big business across the world. And so we constantly have to move through a security progression to make sure we're not falling behind. And what that also does is make sure that we have our arms around all of it. And by the time we get through this circle, it's definitely time to start moving again. And so what do I mean by that? If we look down here, right, I can place this guy about anywhere in this path. When I come into a company, if they say, Chris, we want to start with a risk assessment, we can put him right here. That's his temporary starting line, but he's going to move all the way around the circle back to that. If I come in and they say, Chris, we've got problems. We think there's some security events and we need to monitor for that. We can start him here. But if you look what happens, we're covering the disciplines that we need, right? If we start here with threat management and move through that threat management and really get our heads around what the threats are, then once we know that, we can then intelligently decide, okay, what type of security event monitoring will really work to attack the actual threats to our company, not just some pie in the sky, but what fits what we do, right? That's what we've always got to remember as security practitioners. This has to be built for the organization. It's not a cookie cutter solution. So now we know that we've got the right security event monitoring in place. Now we need to start looking at the employees. How do we control access, physical access to the resources, to the computers? How do we control physical access to USB ports on machines, to the servers, right? That's a big deal. Physical access will get you a lot farther if somebody can plug a USB into a machine than most anything else. So we say, okay, Chris, we've got that under control. Here's a big piece for me. The security training we talked about before, it's low hanging fruit. Now that we have our threats understood, we've got some type of management in place to monitor the events that are happening and control access to critical systems. Now let's bring our employee group, even our ownership group, up to speed and train them very well. This nowadays will help you more than anything. What did I tell you? Your biggest threat is from the users inside your network, right? If we make them, we don't have to teach them about cybersecurity in depth. We have to make them vigilant. We have to make them understand that they're constantly a target, so they will pay attention and watch and be aware. If we can make them aware, we inherently become 100% safer the same day, because now their eyes and ears, and they're worried a little bit, and they're going to start to pass along things that may freak them out once we've showed them what they should be scared of, right? And it really, that's us wrapping the people in with these controls we just put in the background that they don't really see. A big thing from there is moving from there to our annual risk assessment, right? We should always be looking at what active vulnerabilities there are, what risk to the business from a hardware standpoint, from a user standpoint. We have people in the organizational groups in NAD that don't belong to the network anymore, that haven't been here in 120 days. We have machines that have been retired but still have access, right? Those things to understand the risk to the business. A lot of times in that risk assessment, what we'll uncover as well is that we don't have correct policies and procedures in place. Something needs to govern all of this, right? We can't rightfully say, if we don't have policies and procedures, how do we know what our training frequency is? Are we training once a month, once a year? What are we training on? We don't know. We don't have a procedure in place, right? How do we define what our access control looks like without a policy or procedure? We have to set that standard to see what that looks like and how that works, right? From a very base level, we have to set some standards within those policies and procedures. We need to know what it looks like if we're going to do disaster recovery or incident response. We need a set procedure to say, hey, because when everything blows up, if you get ransomware, nobody's thinking clearly. Everybody's terrified. But if we have a set of policies and procedures to guide us, and we know this is the call down, this is the call to action, we need to notify the media, we need to bring in outside resources, everything becomes more clear, right? And then the biggest thing, coming back through that circle, that I see a lot of people forget or not put eyes on a lot, is change and configuration management, right? We need to be building networks. We need to be configuring networks with a hardened baseline that we understand, and that we say everything will be built to this scale, right? And then we also need to be able to manage change within that. If we're going to make a change to how we do things within the network, how we store data, how we move data, how we archive things, whatever that is, we need to have a process for change so it goes through the right approvals, and the business units that will affect become part of that ownership stake that's discussing that, right? A lot of this you're hearing me talk about on this backside is more policy and procedure, management protocols. All that drives and gives some teeth to what we're trying to do on the other side. Once we have sign off from ownership that these are our policies and procedures, then we have to secure things the way we say, and the whole organization works better together. Like I said, you can start from anywhere in this journey. Typically, we like to start a lot of times with doing a risk assessment and training at the same time, get the employees trained, start doing the risk assessment. If they have no security practices, then we'll look at policies and procedures, work through what their heart baseline configurations are, get all that up to speed. And then we'll look at threat management. We'll look at some event monitoring based off what their threats are, and then move into really detailed access and network control. So this is the security journey. And you can see as you move through this, it's never going to stop, right? If we come all the way around through change management and we've done the circle, guess what? By that time, we're like, okay, what's our new threat surface, right? Let's manage the threat again. Let's see if we need to add some tooling, or see if we need to change things in how we're using firewalls or endpoint protections, right? And manage the threat. And you just move through the circle again, and you're constantly updated. So let's dig into that a little more. So we talked about policies and procedures, and you'll find out through this, I believe they're very valuable. I used to, in my younger IT days, didn't see the need as much, but now I do, as we're trying to manage more secure and complex organizations. It's good sometimes to have an external CISO come in, Chief Information Security Officer, virtually. And the reason is there's a lot of things that become commonplace if you're inside your own networks. I found it through my career very, very fulfilling and very useful to have somebody come in from the outside, from that high level, and say, hey, this is what I see. These are some of the things maybe that you could do different. This is what we're seeing in the industry. Because usually somebody from outside that's advising a lot of different clients is seeing a lot of different tooling, a lot of different services, a lot of different applications, and so they can bring that knowledge into you. We also talk about staff augmentation, right? If it gets too big and you're like, my gosh, I don't know even how to write all these procedures, but they need to work for our company, bring in somebody in an advisory role, set them down with somebody on your staff that knows the business and let them help you build that out, right? Do what you do well, bring in resources that can help you do it better. As far as the things you don't do well, here's a big thing. We've seen this a lot in healthcare, manufacturing. You have to vet your vendors. You may have the best security system in the world. You may have the best setup, the best planning, but if you haven't vetted your vendors, because now most of us have to give access to vendors, right? We have to give them some type of access into a network. And by vendors, if you're not familiar, what I mean, say you're in a hospital, you've signed on for this massive electronic health record solution, right? Covers the whole hospital, costs you millions of dollars. Well, the people that build that and sell that to you are now a vendor. They're going to have access at a very high level into your network to help manage that. Do you know what their security is? Do you know if they're safe? Because now you've just made them a trusted connection, right? You've said that basically that this domain, these people are trusted into our network. Do you know what they're doing? You got to make sure they have strong security programs. I would always tell you, if you're doing this at a decently high level, make sure they have a SOC 2 for cyber, right? That SOC audit for cyber will really let you know if they're paying attention to security and they've actually thought through their security programs and practices. You definitely want to make sure they have adequate cyber insurance. If they get breached and it hurts you, you don't want to be on the hook for that if they don't have good insurance to pay. You want to see what those limits look like, how it pays through a third party. You should always have provisions in those contracts related to the things like I just said, like a SOC 2 audit. Like, what are their audit reports? What's their insurance look like? What's their breach notification process, right? You want to know how fast they're going to notify you, especially if they have hooks in your system. You want to know how fast they're going to notify you if they're breached. We want to make sure that we put restrictions on the disclosure of the data they have access to, right? They're probably going to have access to sensitive data in your network. You want to make sure that they're not going to share that with anybody. And then you need to have some serious warranties in your contract around compliance and privacy obligations. And then also data return and disposal. If they have access to that data and some of it's living jointly on them, if you end the relationship, what happens to the data? Will it be disposed in a proper way? Will it be sent back to you for disposal? These are big conversations we have to have now, because basically we have multiple hands a lot of times in the same network. Security awareness training, again, part of our journey here. I'm big on this. You can probably already tell. We offer free, no cost cybersecurity training and introductory training to any company that asks for it in America, because we're so serious about it. I myself or somebody on staff will come in and train them and give them an introductory lesson into cybersecurity. We break it down and translate it so everybody in the company can understand. That, I feel, is the best way to kick off a training awareness program, because it's real people talking to them from outside the organization. It's instructor led. Then what we want to do is put some service in place or some tooling, right? We want to have testing. We want to have continuing education, online content. So if you look at the managed security awareness training providers now, that's what they do. They're going to set up a program based off what you do. They're going to deliver continuous education to the users. They're going to test the users some against that. And there's going to be good online content that's gamified or they make it funny. A lot of them are hiring professional actors now, and it's almost like little movies, and they've shortened them so they're not so boring. But that training awareness is key. If your employees are vigilant and they know that they're that they're under attack and they could be part of the threat, then they're going to pay much more attention and help us all, right? Help us achieve our goal. We talked about risk analysis and assessment. This one's big for me. We see a lot of people now just jump in and they'll call and they say, hey, we want to do a pen test. We've never done anything much around security, and we've never done a penetration test or any kind of assessment. We want a pen test. That's not the place to start. We're going to be testing against something that has massive open gaps and holes, and the report's going to be 60 pages long, and it's going to be a nightmare. We first need to come in and do a good risk analysis and assessment of the environment, right? What are the security risks of the environment? Do we have 400 people in Active Directory that no longer work for the company? That's a pretty easy one to knock out. That's probably going to get smashed on a pen test. Do we have listening ports open? Like, just simple things that we can find through these risk assessments. And most of the companies I know nowadays are all using NIST 853. It's a guideline. It's a framework, right? For how we all can jointly work the same way to assess risk in an environment. Vulnerability scans are the next one. I talked a minute ago about, do we have computers, people that shouldn't be in the networks? You can do something as simple as a Nessa scan, right? It's not going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to give you a wealth of information about some vulnerabilities in the organization, things you can easily go and fix and patch with some action items you can take. Once you've gone through those exercises and you feel like you've attacked everything in those, then we come in and do an actual penetration test, which is where you're looking at more. Yes, we're still going to run a vulnerability scanner internally and externally, but now we're going to get into manual operations that your security tools may not be as finely tuned for. Now we're going to have actual people do social engineering against your employees, looking for attack vectors throughout the organization in a multitude of ways, to see if we can actually get in as a human attacker the way that we're facing from the rest of the world in these attacks now. So we always believe the risk assessment and the vulnerability scan should definitely come first before testing. And we'll get into that a little more. So what's the risk assessment, right? We're looking at legal risks, like sector specific for your industry. The energy industry has compliance issues, healthcare, financial, law firms now have all the data for everybody. What kind of enforcement are you under? You have FTC regs, congressional investigations. Could there be lawsuits based off, certain breaches in the environment? What is your actual risk based off of what you do every day and how you store and transfer information? Part of that is not just the legal risk, but the legal assessment, right? What kind of policy and procedures do you have to help control risk from a governance standpoint? And how do you implement those policies, right? Do you have an incident response plan? As we said before, your vendor selection, that should be in your risk assessment. We're going to assess how you're dealing with vendors because they pose a risk to you. Again, training is part of that risk assessment. We're going to analyze on a very deep level what kind of training you do, and also do some data mapping and just see where does the data reside at this point. A lot of people ask nowadays, where does all your data reside? And they have no idea because the networks have been built and stacked and pieced together. And I understand it, but we've got to start to figure that out. And the way I mentioned that we do this before in a lot of ways is by using NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And they have this voluntary methodology that helps us to assess and reduce the risk in what they call critical infrastructure sectors. It was updated in 2017. Some of it's been updated slowly again. You don't have to do all of this, right? And it says critical infrastructure, but this can apply to businesses of any size or make, the way this security standards are set up. You want to do this proportional to the data you handle and the size and the nature of the business. I always tell people, if you're going to work through a third party that helps you with cybersecurity, make sure that they understand that you don't need a Fortune 100 program for a 50-person company, right? We have to assess this based off of your needs. And that's something that I think is critical to what we do every day. NIST recommends that we perform a company-wide vulnerability assessment immediately, that we implement an information security program, that we review that program periodically, at least annually, that we implement data security policies like data classification. And all this is going to be in your policies and procedures, right? Your data classifications, your password strengths, your access control methods, your encryption methods, data disposal methods, patch management methods. All this needs to be in writing for continuity. If something happens within the organization and key members of this team move on, somebody needs a playbook. And this is what we're doing. We're building out a playbook. So I touched on this a second ago, but let's dig in. So I get this question a lot, right? People come to me and they say, Chris, we need a penetration test. And I'm like, well, have you done a vulnerability assessment? Or they'll come and say, what's the difference? So a vulnerability assessment, typically, it's fairly general, right? It covers a broad area in the scope of the business and a large assessment of different areas. I love this. It's predictable, right? I know when those security guys are going to scan us. So it's not like a pen test where we come in blind and nobody knows we're doing it. It can be unreliable from the fact that it will get false positives, right? Not unreliable that it'll miss things, but there's some things that you'll find on a vulnerability assessment that really aren't vulnerable, and you've got other protections through softwares or network segmentation or stuff that will protect you. But it gives us a good idea to go look at those things to make sure that they're a false positive. I love this one. It invites debate among sysadmins. It really does, because there's so many ways to architect a network correctly. And I know that sounds crazy, but you can build networks many different ways. And so it gets a conversation going, though, between the people that administer these systems about, okay, what's right, what's wrong. We want that healthy debate to make sure we're doing it well. and it produces a report with really good, guidelines and actionable items as to how to go fix and attack these things, right? That's the baseline. Because if we fix and attack these things, and we understand from a larger scale what our risk is and our vulnerability is, then once we tie those up, now we move to a penetration testing focus, right? This is much more focused in scope. It includes us doing manual targeted attacks to exploit very specific vectors, right? We're trying to exploit not just your servers or your firewalls or your storage. We're also trying to exploit physical assets, right? We're going to drop thumb drives outside of your office and see who picks one up and plugs it in. Because as soon as they plug it in, it's calling home to us, right? That's a huge risk. We're going to see if we can walk right into your server room without a key. If you've got a warehouse with paper records everywhere, that we can just walk in the loading dock. It's unpredictable. You don't know how or when we're coming at you. It's highly accurate, right? If I come at you and say, I got in this way, and this way, or if I'm sitting on your domain controller sending you messages, you can pretty well guarantee we've got proof that we got in. And what it does is it takes that proof of concept and tests against what we thought we mitigated the vulnerabilities about, right? We're going from a proof of concept around stopping the vulnerabilities to actually, now let's really do this in action and see if they work. And it's a binary result. If you ask us or one of our third-party partners to do a penetration test, we're either going to own you or we're not. We're either going to get in and we're going to literally be able to, like I said, we want to go to the domain controller. We want the control of the DC. If we get there, we own you. If we don't get anywhere near there and don't get in, then you did a great job. It's a very binary result from a penetration test, or it should be. It should be very measurable. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more of the differences. The scope of a pen test, which a lot of people ask, what's the scope? Targeted recon. So we really want to start to understand, what softwares you're using, how you're transferring things, what protection softwares or tools you may be using. We can find a lot of that on the open internet just by checking records. We're going to do social engineering. We're literally going to do it over the phone, over text, over email. We're going to try to steal Facebook passwords, because usually people will use the same password for social as they do for work if they're using the same passwords. Like I said, physical facilities. We're going to see if you tell me something's fenced off and nobody can get in, there was 200 yards of fence torn down by a contractor. Well, that's not going to work. Wireless. We are going to do serious tests on your wireless security and if there's rogue access points that shouldn't be there. And dumpster diving, right? I mean, I can't tell you, we went to a hospital recently and did a penetration test. I say recently, it was a few years ago. And we walked around the back to the warehouse door and it was wide open. And there was a ton of medical records sitting up by a computer that was open and unlocked that were getting ready to be sent off to be shredded. We walked around the corner to the dumpster and found other records that had medical information of a different type that were in the dumpster. That's the things we do on a penetration test. We're looking at a full picture, right? Well, I've had some directors and people ask me lately, why do we even bother? Well, the pen test really teaches you that the planning is not always going to get us the results we want, right? That maybe we missed some vulnerability. This is an active test to see if everything we put in place, if policies, procedures, training, if all the things we did are actually working together. We're looking to see, do your administrators follow the policies that they help set in line? Are they following the password policies when they set users up? Are they doing a hardened baseline? Are they doing the right configurations? Is the network built securely? Like I said, you want to audit that physical security. I mean, a lot of people have no idea how physically vulnerable they are. It helps raise security awareness. If they know that somebody's going to come in and hit a pen test at some point, I promise you, they're going to be a little more apt to protect things and do a better job. We're identifying weaknesses, right? What if we find out we get in through a person, through an insider threat or an accidental exposure? You need to know that. What a good pen test should do is also provide management a realistic view of the security posture. So we want management to be able to see why we need to invest, right? Why this is critical, why this is a business decision, not an IT decision. And the biggest thing, my bottom slide there, is if we can break into it, somebody else can. And you'd rather pay somebody to figure that out where it's not as much of a threat as just have it happen. So once, we know that we've tested against the environment, what are some other real ways in that security journey that we talked about that we can help to really protect ourselves? Authentication and authorization are a big deal now. I can't tell you, most of the time we get in, it's somebody that's using their work email as a third-party identifier for Facebook, Insta, Twitter, right? So they'll be So that would be like me using Chris May at advantage.tech as my login for Facebook. That should never happen. That's the company's email address. But what happens is when they do that, they also use the same password. And so somebody goes and steals their Facebook password and bam, they're in your network. How do we attack that? Two-factor or multi-factor, as most of us probably know, is a huge deal right now. It's something you have and something you know. So you know the password and you have your phone. Without both of those, you can't get in. Password managers are a big deal. We use one at Advantage called LastPass. We have a lot of clients that use it. There's other ones, Dashlane. There's a few good ones that are all encrypted and safe. It helps where people can have different passwords for everything, and it generates those and remembers them for them in an encrypted environment. And we want to also enforce least privilege, right? Just because somebody has a password and two-factor, we still don't want them to be able to access everything in the network. We need them to only have access up to the level that required to do their job. That's it. We want a ceiling them at what is required to work, nothing else. And so that's something we should always remember, is that least privilege rule. I talk a lot about passwords because this is what we're all dealing with right now. I know that in our organizations, we have people that have their passwords named after their dog, their kid, stuff you could easily find on their social media, and they just use it over and over. So we've really got to, as the people, putting this information out and help them, we've got to make sure that we give them ways to protect those passwords and make them safe. I talked about this earlier. It gets overlooked a lot, changing configuration management. Right? We need a process to this, though. If somebody wants to make a change to the way we are delivering our network services, the way we're architected, the way we're backing up, all these other things, first they need to request that change, right, to the right person. We need to then see what's the impact analysis, right? What other stakeholders in the business or the operation will be affected, right? If we understand that it's fine and the people will be affected not in a bad way, then we can approve that change. Once we approve that change, we want to make sure we implement it in the way that it was requested. We don't want to make a change in there that we didn't see, and then we want to review and report once that change was made. This is a huge deal right now, right? When we change softwares, when we look at patch management in different ways, security automations, we want to make sure those changes are happening in a measurable way that is pushed out by process and policy and procedure. Threat management is huge. Endpoint protection, antivirus, spam filtering. We all know these are key right now. Firewalls, content filtering, backup. These are huge. They're not going to go away. We all need this as a baseline. What do your backups look like? Okay. This is the look on my face when somebody calls. This meme was made about me at work. Somebody calls and says, we have ransomware. I'm like, you got backups, right? Because that's your only saving grace nowadays, unless you want to pay. I think this little girl caught the house on fire. I don't go catch the house on fire, though, but I've always thought this was funny. They said this is what I look like when somebody says they have ransomware. Make sure you have good hybrid backups that can protect you. That's basic needs. You want to choose the application very carefully based off your needs for backups. You want to choose your scheduling on how and when you back them up. You want to be very careful about how you implement that so you don't expose yourself to any other threat surface that's not necessary. You want to inventory what you have, verify it. You want to make sure on a very good frequency that you can restore data, that you can do test restores. You want to automate it as much as possible. You don't need people changing tapes in and out, right? This needs to be done on an automated digital process, and you want to make sure it's safe at a base level. So I'm going to wrap this up right now. I know we got about 12 minutes. Let's look at it. So we've talked to you about the security journey, around what all that entails in a little more detail. Where are we at right now, right? As CIOs, CISOs, IT directors, whatever we may be, or whatever we may want to be. What's the evolution of security? So, right, the basics. We've got password and AD, patch management, and backups. We should all have that. Then we've got our perimeter, right? We've got firewalls. We've got spam filters. We've got, web application filters. We should all have those same things as well. Those are a have to now. A lot of us have moved to defense in depth, where we have endpoint protections like a Sentinel-1 EDR or a Carbon Black. We're doing SSL inspections. We're doing deep packet inspection on traffic through firewalls, which not a lot of people did 5 years ago even. We're doing anti-DDoS stuff. So we're getting into more of these advanced things. Detection and response, right? We're trying to do log aggregation and correlation, incident detection and response. These get harder from inside an organization if you don't have all the resources, right? You see the bar gets higher. And then containment and remediation, right? How do we contain an intrusion? How do we remediate it? How do we update our policy and our structure to not have that happen again, right? This is a big thing. Most commercial companies today are right here at defense in depth, right? They're getting stuff on their endpoints. They're getting EDRs on EPP products. Most commercial companies want to be here. They want to get to this detection and response level through log aggregation. This is where the real details are in the weeds, right? It's being able to detect threats inside the network and respond to them in near real time. And this is the gap that we have right now. This is what I'm seeing from my level is the biggest growth in security that we see is more of that managed security operations center service, SOC as a service, where you've got somebody coming in that's looking at all your logs, correlating data through the logs, storing those logs for research, looking at threats through the individuals in the company with real-time vulnerability scanning, and also understands a plan and builds a plan for not only the detection of that, but how to deliver a response with actionable items. This is where we need to be now to truly secure our threat with the users. That's why I said SOC as a service plays here. Nowadays, you have a choice. You can either build out your own internal security team within your organization, or you can outsource that to somebody that does security operations center services. There's no other way. You have to have a security presence at this point. It's just based off how your organization is structured as to which one of these you do. Most small and medium business like we have in West Virginia will never have a team to fill this gap and move into that detection and response role because it's such an overwhelming thing to manage. Prevention's not enough at this point at all. So what's that look like? What's the evolution? So 53% of the cost per incident is spent on detection and response. 240 days to detect. Remember I said earlier we were looking between 200 and 230 or 40 days, and 46 days to respond. This is from NIST. This is scary, right? What we need to do is what we talked about a minute ago, that we need to identify, protect. A lot of us are already doing all that. Detect and respond is where the gaps are, right? Right here. This requires time. It requires people. It requires, near 24/7 monitoring. This is what I see as the biggest gap for us in the industry that we need to fill. Sorry, I went the wrong way. And here's what the challenge is for even companies like us in IT and managed security is this is what it's costing you nowadays to hire good people, right? To be very transparent from, like I said, a CIO or CISO level, these numbers are scary, right? We have to hire these people within our company as well. So, I can tell you these figures are real. And so what we have to look at now is what's that balance as somebody leading the organization security practices. Can we afford to do it internally? Do we want to manage it and have our hands on it? Or do we want to outsource it to somebody that does it really well? This is a conversation we all need to be having now internally. And if we decide we want to outsource that, we need to look at, there's a lot of companies now, and this is why I bring this up, are selling SOC as a service. They're not all the same. We've got to make sure they're comprehensive, that we get centralized portals and views so we can see the whole network. You've got to make sure it's 24/7 because these things happen when you least expect them to on Christmas Day. And it's got to be predictable pricing. If you're going to outsource your security, make sure somebody's giving you a number that is good, that's not going to change based off data ingestion or at their whims. And what should that look like? This should be with any security operations center, whether you do it internally or whether you do it externally. We're just going to look at this real quick from a back-end process. We won't get too deep into the technicals of it. But you've got all this data. You've got users, cloud, apps, servers, networks, endpoints, IoT, all this stuff, right? What we want to do is feed all that. We want to get logs and events from all of that. We want to feed that, and we want to also take threat intelligence from the IOCs worldwide and feed that into a correlation database, and then feed the event logs and stuff in that same correlation database. Now we're running those events against actual threat intelligence. What happens now? Anything that comes out as an alert comes up and is run through this real-time correlation engine, and then it's pushed out to an actual alert. From that alert, it should then be sent as an incident, and you should have some type of analyst, a forensic analyst, looking over that data, right, to see what is happening. We want them to be able to query back to the data lake we have where we're storing all the logs and records to understand what's up, and when necessary, to bring in this SOC engineer back here to hunt for unknown threats out of what we understand this correlation database is. This is how we actually affect real security. Real-time correlations, forensics, and threat hunting. You can take 600 million observations in a week, bring that down to 700 investigations, and bring it down to reporting to your company 1 to 5 incidents a week. That's something a CIO, CISO, or IT can manage, is 1 to 5 incidents a week they have to research with actionable ways to fix them. Trying to manage 600 million observations is not typically going to happen unless you have a $200 million a year SOC like some places I've been before do. This is a big one, right? So we've just sat here and talked about, managed security operations centers, security journeys, all this. Here's something that just kicks people in the face though that we see breaches through. It's these cell phones. Everybody's using them. Everybody's got work email on them, work folders, work files, and they're floating out everywhere. Devices in the wild. Put a mobile device management software on them, please. Put a way you can lock them out, way you can wipe them, way you can locate them. If somebody doesn't want to have it on there, then they shouldn't have any of your corporate data on the phone. It's pretty much that simple nowadays. And I just throw that at the end because I want you to remember that. Go and look at your organization and see what's happening with cell phones. It will most likely terrify you, as it usually does me. But we have ways to manage that now. And with that, I hope that was informative. I covered a lot of information. I usually do this a little longer form, but I'm happy to take questions. And I hope that that really kind of set the stage for how we look at security from a higher level with strategy and purpose.
That was a fantastic presentation, sir.
Yes, it was.
I have
Okay.
a couple comments / questions. You know, I saw your change management slide and it made me think about what do you think is the sweet spot so you don't have like analysis paralysis? Because personally, I've been in organizations where they form a committee to learn about should we make this change, and it takes 60 days, and by the time it's all done, they start the whole process all over again because they've got a new product and you never get anything done. So what do you think is the sweet spot for getting your change management through?
I worked with an organization to help figure that out with the same problem you're talking about. And here's this always goes back to this for me. And like I said, I didn't used to feel like policies and procedures were that important as a young IT guy. I don't think any of us do, but we can control that with really good procedures in place before that happens, right? So we want to say, if you're going to come in and request change, this has to go to this specific department in person, and they have this long to respond, right? This has to be reviewed within X number of days because it's critical to the organization. Then we have to say that impact analysis has to be done in this amount of time, and we delegate it to people. It's harder to get out of it when the procedures say your role does this in this amount of time, right? And then we have a very clear path. Once it's reviewed, the approval process is where things die, right? They go to some C-suite's desk and they never get done. And that's what you're saying. It takes forever, and then we have to go right back. We also have to have in there to say this approval for this change needs to go to the CIO or CISO, say, and these approvals need to happen within a calendar week, right? Then we still yet have to go a little farther in our change management policy and say that the change may take an unknown factor of time to implement, but now we've at least got it approved in a sensible manner because we've said steps 1, 2, and 3 have to happen exactly like this. We can't as much delineate how steps 4, 5 take on implementation and review, but those usually work because the person that's pushing it, that's the driver or the project owner, wants to get it done. They just can't get it through approval. So again, we use that policy and procedure as a governance document to say it has to happen this way in this time frame.
Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned, going out and doing penetration tests. I was curious. Have you ever had an instance where you actually went out and didn't find a way to get in? I know if you hear Kevin Mitnick talk, or we had Ira Winkler come in last year, they almost both say 99.99% of the times they find a way to get in. Whether they completely own your organization or not is a whole different story. But is this always beneficial because you're going to find something that the organization needs to correct?
We've 100% of the time found something on a pen test. The 99.99, I'll say. Sometimes that'll just be, and it's gotten easier because, like I said, we've got some tooling, as you know, that can go and run against the servers and the networks and the external internals. We're just going after the people. To be very clear, we're just social engineering people, right? I'm going to go straight. I'm going to run your roles from all your company email addresses. And I'm going to run them against the login. You can find all the login emails for Facebook, Twitter, Insta, all that. Takes a while to run it, but I'm going to run it. When I find people in your organization using that email, I'm going to attack them on social media, and I'm going to get the same password that they use for work. And so then we're in some form, even if it's just watching emails moving back and forth.
Because they're going to be doing credential stuffing, basically.
Absolutely. And 80% of the time, once we do that, we can quickly move laterally through the networks and end up in a full-on breach situation, right? The internal network segregations nowadays are just still not up to par. And so that's why we don't mind getting some low-level secretary's password, right? Because if you give us enough time, we'll get there. I've never had one where we didn't at least get through somebody's username and password. And a
Okay.
lot of times we can do that with tools now too, right? We're running online dictionaries and number generators and all kind of crazy stuff. And it's all out there for free. All the same
Right.
stuff I use to do it, the attackers are using. So that's the cool thing about our penetration testing is we're attacking you just like everybody else is. And
Yeah.
those people know as much as me or more.
Yeah, I do find it kind of laughable when people are like, "We want you to come in and do a penetration test, but this, and this is off limits."
Yeah.
It's not going to be to an actual hacker. Like,
Mm-mm.
you should, if you're going to like try to be, preventative here and secure, you need to let me take a crack at everything.
Absolutely. Well, and I'll
Um,
tell you how serious that needs to be. That's a good point you just brought up, Patrick.
mhm.
Is many of our clients have a managed security operations center service that covers their business, right? That manages with full 24/7 SOC. When we have those customers do a third party penetration test, we don't tell the SOC.
Because you want to see if they're actually doing their job, if they can
We're
detect it, right?
basically, yeah, we're basically blue teaming them, right?
Hmm.
And so we don't tell them, and that's where we need to be now. We need to be very transparent, and we need to use those third parties. If I manage a company's IT, I'm not going to do their penetration test. It's ridiculous.
Right.
I'm gonna bring in a partner that I know that is really good at what they do, and say, okay, you go test this business, and guess what? They're testing against me, and they're not going to tell me when they're coming in. I can promise you that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because you want it to be as realistic as possible, because otherwise, it's not an accurate representation, I wouldn't think.
You're absolutely correct.
We were talking with Danielle Cox earlier about jobs that she has for people, and what type of people and what experience she'd be looking for. If people were interested in coming to talk to Advantage Technology, and they wanted to be able to have a job, or they were wanting to work towards that, what type of people would you all be looking for here in the state to bring on? What requirements are you wanting to have?
I tell you, there's a couple things right now. One of the things we were just talking about this morning that we're looking at bringing a couple interns on is there's a lot of work right now around having somebody that can come in. So we have a massive amount of Office 365 customers, right? There's a million configuration settings in 365. We do a hardened baseline when we set it up and all that. But there's some like you can go to GitHub now and get these really awesome tools that we can go run if you know how to run them, that you can run up against those 365 environments that would start to give you actionable items to make sure you're not missing anything. The people that know how to run those tools effectively, and I say effectively because if you don't know what you're doing, you'll break things or you don't know how to report on them. That's critical to us, right? And a lot of times this is people that have had some backgrounds in scripting and maybe understand a little bit about networks and understand a little bit about surveillance. That's huge right now. A lot in our state, for example, where we have trouble finding security talent in the state, we do a lot of stuff with big international players that back us up, but we need the people on our side to interface with them, right? I need somebody that knows how to manage a relationship. If we're managing all the security for a customer through a big $4 billion security operations center, I need somebody in the middle that speaks the language of the security operations center and can break it down to the client as well, right? I think I've told you this before. One of the biggest things we look for nowadays, and it may seem weird in IT, is soft skills. If I have somebody that has a 2-year degree and knows a little bit about technology, I can teach them but they know they have soft skills where they can be a sales engineer to talk to customers, be a security sales engineer, even be an IT account executive. That's where the money is nowadays. We can't succeed without those people that understand the products, and you can't just go sell IT because you've sold paper, right? You can't just SE solutions because you SE'd something around piping. Like you have to understand the back end process. I'm telling you, those people are incredibly valuable. And the barrier to entry into cybersecurity is not as big as people think, right? It's just not.
Yeah, I think I had told you too off mic that my students talk about when they're putting together their resume. They're like, I'm going to apply for an IT job. I probably shouldn't put my Taco Bell job or my Walmart job or whatever. And I was like, yes, do it.
Yes, dude.
Years ago I would have said no, they don't care about that. But now these days it's definitely the fact that if you can maintain one of those jobs where you're front facing, customer facing, and you can prove to somebody that you worked there and didn't get fired because you didn't chew off someone's head, that's like 98% of the interview. Because like you said, we can teach you the skills that you need. We just don't want you to make us lose a client because you blew your plop or lost your temper, that type of thing. So I think
Absolutely.
that
Our
sounds great.
our level one technicians right out of junior college or college, one of the very most integral things they have to do is interface with our clients. They're going on site to fix a computer problem. They're calling them on the phone to fix a lockout situation, right? If they can't talk to people and function accordingly, they're of no value to us because they can't service us. Same thing within a business. If you're doing IT inside of a company, you need to be able to communicate with the stakeholders. You need to be able to communicate with the employees. If you have that centralized communication, a lot of times we've been guilty in IT of sticking ourselves in a closet and saying, I'm going to do my job. Y'all stay away from me. And I'm just going to yell at you when stuff breaks. Well, that doesn't help anybody, especially us. And so if we can, that's what I need a lot. If I get somebody that's got, say, look at like an IT management degree. It's a 4-year degree. You learn the high level of IT and networking and all that, but you also learn business skills and budgeting and planning and finance and public speaking. Guess what happens? Now you can go in and be a true advisor to a company. The companies love what we do because we all came out of industry. So I can speak to you about how this will affect your budgets, whether it's CapEx, OpEx expense, how it's going to, if we can't show the business need for this and how big the risk is to the business, then we're not going to make it very far. And if you can bridge those gaps, I'll hire those people all day. I promise you. I'll hire them right now.
You got to speak the language. I know, like Josh used to, or not Josh, Scott used to always talk in class that, you go to your accountant, in your accounting department. You're like, I need a new computer, and they're like, why? Show me numbers. Like, you got to speak their language. You got to be able to have numbers. You got to be able to run your performance monitor, do checks on your machine to be like, look, this is how taxed this machine is. And if you can speak their language, and they can understand. I think that makes sense. If you have the option to come from industry and you can already speak that language, that'll help, because they're like, oh, this is a business person. They know technology, but this is a business person. They speak the language I do. I think that's great. We do have a question here from Facebook. One of our former students here, Josh Brock, asked, so what would be an appropriate first step to move from defense in depth to detection and response role? Would it be more appropriate devices, or would this be a quote unquote hire more people kind of deal?
So what we really see, and that's a really good question. You know, years past, people tried to do it with just tooling, right? So basically, when they went from that defense in depth and moved to that detection and response piece, they would go out and get something like a SIM tool, right? Like Splunk, something like that. And so now they were using Splunk, and you're going to start to pull in all these logs and try to correlate all this log data, right? And figure out, on the back end, what's really happening. Because that's where the visibility is, right? Is in those day-to-day transactions. And so that's what they would try to do for years to get to that detection place. But then that doesn't help you on the response piece. Splunk's not going to tell you how to implement change or to fix things if you find something that may be broken. It's simply an alerting tool. Now, what I'm seeing, that step from defense in depth to detection and response, is to what most of the people I see now do are outsourcing that to somebody that runs their own tooling, like a large SIM. And so they're pulling all the log aggregation and correlation. They're backing that up with the people. So now we're looking at devices, software, and people, right? They're going to put a device in your network between the core switch and firewall that can scan all the traffic. They're going to send all that traffic to that correlation engine, but a person is going to dig through all that and decide what's real or not real. And then that person is going to send you actionable items to say, do this, this, and this to respond. To do that internally is going to require you to research the hardware to do it, research the software to run the SIM, and you're going to have to hire a bunch of people, because you might generate, one client I just looked at yesterday that we did a review of quarterly generated 207 million logs last month. And out of that was 1,800 pieces of activity that then had to be filtered down to real incidents and down to, like I said, 5 deliverables. So
Wow.
You have to attack it with the software, the hardware, and the people. And the easiest way we see is to find somebody that can do that for you. You can find SOC as a service now, depending on how it's managed and who does it, between 15,000, starting at 15,000 a year. So now you hire one security engineer, like I showed you, at 124 grand, and really they're going to cost you about 160 now because everything's changed. So you can pay 160,000 a year for one man or woman from 9 to 5 for 5 days, or you can go pay 15 to 80,000 a year, or 100,000 a year even, for a fully managed security team that you can call at any time, ask if you have problems, questions, answers, and you literally have bought yourself a Fortune 100 level security team. That's how we see people attacking it. That's how I recommend people attack it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm very clear about what we do at Advantage. We have a $4 billion company that delivers SOC as a service to us. I am protected by a $4 billion company that is the best in the world at security operations center work. I can't build that myself, no matter how much I want to. And now I know that at 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody's actually watching my back and will have me on the phone and wake me up if something bad happens. That's the way we see it being attacked now. Now I work with some really big companies that might have, 30, 40,000 employees. What are they doing? Some of them are going out, buying the sensors, buying the software, adding the people to their security operations centers, but they also have $100 million budgets. So if you don't have a $100 million budget, the only way to really get in at a decent price point is to outsource it to somebody that does it well on a big economy of scale.
Excellent, excellent. He said, thank you very much for that. Well, Chris, thank you so much for explaining, the serious in-depthness that we have to do and think about for our strategies. Everybody out there, Chris is going to be back with us at 3 o'clock to actually talk about his trajectory into IT, which you alluded to some in your presentation, and just to kind of break down the walls and the ideology out there that, like, I could never get to where Chris is. Wait till you hear it. It's a fascinating story, and it's not the most conventional thing. And we just want to realize, if you want to, as he said, if you want to go into cybersecurity, it's not that big of a barrier to try to get into. It's a great field. If you have a passion for it, you should definitely look at it. But he'll be back at 3 o'clock to be able to talk about that, and also give you all more advice about getting into the field and answer more questions and all that. But I appreciate you talking to us here, sir, about doing security strategies. I hope everybody out there appreciate it. And I'll see you again at 3 o'clock, sir. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Scott, Patrick, thank you all so much for having me today.
Thank you.